So we're going to continue discussing the situation of the Jewish communities in Ukraine and in Russia, and also the connection to Israel and the immigration to Israel. With us in the studio is a very good friend of mine, one of the smarter people that I know, Professor Zeev Khanin. He's the academic chairman of the Institute for Euro-Asian Jewish Studies of the EAJC, and also in Bar-Ilan University. Shalom, how are you?
Shalom, thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be with you.
So just recently there's different numbers that were published about the situation of immigration from Ukraine and Russia to Israel. If I remember correctly, more than 30,000 made aliyah from Russia, about 15,000, 14,000 from Ukraine.
Exactly, your figures are absolutely correct. As updated by this morning, I would say that we have about 58,000 people that came from the former Soviet Union.
Just in 2022?
After the war started, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the 24th of February this year. So of them, more than 34,500 came from Russia alone. About 14,000 came from Ukraine, but the majority of them actually came from in the period of so-called panic aliyah, a few weeks after the beginning of the Russian invasion there, military invasion, I mean. So since May, Ukrainian aliyah decreased dramatically. Then the moment, as far as I know the situation, we are having like a few dozens of people each month, not more than 100 people from Ukraine, and aliyah from the FSU is overwhelmingly aliyah from the Russian Federation.
Right. So, but there were, obviously politicians always do this. They give out these big numbers of expected, immigrants, expected olim, because they want to receive a budget, and you could look at it in a positive or a cynical way.
It's
right?
very cynical, yeah. Okay.
Again, you could also look at it in the positive side, is where they actually want to get budget for activity, right?
We we want more.
We
more
all want,
no
right?
doubt
We
about
both
it,
want the same thing. So, how do you explain the fact that such a small number of Ukrainian Jewish olim came to Israel as opposed to what we expected? Because we expected there were talks of even 100,000 or maybe even smaller, 50,000, 70,000 olim from Ukraine, and most of them are not here.
Well, I would say there are three reasons for that.
Okay.
On one hand, the Ukrainian community is 3 times smaller than the Russian community. So, according to estimations of Della Pergola, Mark Tolz, the noted demographers,
right.
We have about 600,000 people eligible to come from Russia to Israel, according to the law of return, and 3 times less in Ukraine.
Right.
So if we are talking about the ethnic core, there it's about 170,000, 80,000 in Russia, and much less, about 42, 43, 45,000 in Ukraine. So between this ethnic core and the borders of the Jewish collective, we have quite a substantial number of people. So probably one reason. Second reason, there is a difference between Ukrainian community, Jewish community, and Russian Jewish community. In Ukraine remain people who more or less connected their destiny with that country. They decided not to go anywhere, majority of them. At least according to research that was done by the initiative of Eurasian Jewish Congress in 2019-2020, which I was in the head of, it was pretty clear that in Ukraine the interest for immigration was lower than in Russia or Belarus, for example. The Russian community is even less. So at the moment, the dramatic change in the situation pushed these people to live for abroad. But at the moment, and that's probably the second reason, we don't really know whether they left for good, forever,
or
just temporarily in order to stay in more convenient place like Europe.
Right.
Should get what is possible to get, but temporarily, and then to consider living further.
And the third?
Either to
Germany.
To stay in Germany or go to England, United States,
Right.
or to make Aliyah to Israel. I'm
Right.
not rejecting an opportunity that next year we will get an Aliyah of Ukrainian Jews from Europe,
Right.
not from Ukraine. Or to come back, especially if the situation there will improve.
Right.
Third reason, I would say that Ukrainian Jewish identity, you probably know that opposite to the situation here in Israel, that we have a sort of a convergence of identity, in terms of identity and identification of Olim that came from various countries of the former Soviet Union. They combined, very quickly become, in terms of their identity, part of so-called Third Israel, Russian Israel,
Right.
yeah? And the part of the Jewish collective, of course, of this country.
Right.
In the former Soviet Union, we have a new phenomena of establishment of the local ethno-civic groups within the borders of the independent states. So we are not talking about post-Soviet Jewry anymore. We are talking about Jews of Russia, Jews of Belarus, of Moldova, of Ukraine, of Azerbaijan, and so on and so forth. The transformations and political transformations in Ukraine, it becomes sort of a part of Europe, of pro-Western, and so on and so forth. They probably keep these people there. Let's look at the situation. Two countries, for the first time in 100 years, Jews are fighting Jews fighting Jews.
Right.
On the different sides for the first time
That's very
since the end of the World War I. Okay, and if a Russian Jewish community simply demonstrates a sort of a loyalty, but not active involvement in the situation, Ukrainian Jewish community is totally mobilized in favor of Ukraine
Right.
in this war.
They're very
So,
patriotic.
yeah, making Aliyah is a sort of taking a sort of obligation that you declare your loyalty to the
A
Jewish
different
state
country, right.
rather than Ukraine. For Russian Jews, it's not a problem. I mean, that is why we have this phenomenon of getting Israeli citizenship, regardless whether people prefer going to stay here or to live temporary and then come back. That's another
Right.
question. Probably that's another question. But
By the way, it's very similar to the fact that many Israelis and Jews around the world have applied to receive Spanish or Portuguese citizenship, right? I mean, there are both situations. You have law firms that's their specialty. You pay them a certain fee. You're not planning to live there. Let's say a very high percentage of the
that's
time.
interesting comparison. I would say
And
that
they're very mad at the situation there.
yeah, but at the same time, I would say that in terms of FSU Jews, it's not exactly the same as getting Spanish citizenship.
100%.
Majority of them are planning to stay, according to the studies that I know or was involved in. I would say that at least 60% of those who came in the recent wave of Aliyah absolutely sure or consider or believe that they will stay in Israel in the long run.
What percentage is this?
More than 60%.
More than 60%. How do you identify this wave of Aliyah as opposed to other waves just even a few years ago from Russia and Ukraine? Is their Jewish identity levels different? Are they more or less committed to Jewish causes or Israeli causes?
It's a very good question. A lot of cliche and stigmas twisting around in the Israeli media and public discourse. Maybe it's a good time to say that on one hand, we have a slight, or in some weeks, even substantial growth of Jews according to Halacha, because we get like it's a representable sample of Jewish community in the FSU, especially in Russia and Ukraine. I'm sure you know that 50% of Russian Jews, they're concentrated just in two capital cities,
Right.
In Moscow and St. Petersburg, with a high level of ethnic Jews and Jews according to Halacha. That is why the share of so-called halachic Jews is growing. Due to the fact that we are again getting aliyah from big industrial population, cultural, commercial centers.
But do you have numbers or percentages of them being halachic?
I would say that, well, I don't know exactly at the
right,
moment what's
right.
the story, but of course it's much more than 25%
Right.
that they're talking recently, that they're talking now about it. But even that...
I'll just mention, Professor Khanin is speaking about the reports of information from different government ministries showing that those who made Aliyah in the year of 2020, only 28%, I think, were considered Jewish, not halachically Jewish, but Jewish according to the law of return.
According to Allah, I would say that it was said.
Are considered
well,
Jews.
2020, it was a difficult year of Corona.
Right.
It shouldn't be taken as a representable sample of Aliyah from the FSU, and especially what is going on now. I mean, 2022 is
so
entirely
what would
different.
be your estimate of halachic Jews?
I don't know exactly, but I would say that between 35 to 50%, whether these are where they
this
halachic
Russia
Jews
or
from
FSU?
all in all, from all the FSU, whether they're able to prove it or not.
Okay.
That's another
Right.
pair of shoes.
Right.
But another story is more important to my mind. We should talk about the identity of these people,
Right.
whether they see themselves a part of the Jewish collective or not. According to two congruent studies that were done, which I was involved into, I would say that in the first study, 70% said that they feel Jewish, just Jewish, or Jew of Russia, or Jew of Ukraine, and so on.
But altogether 70%.
Altogether 70%. Another research, we came back to these people after they spent a few months in Israel, and this share grew to 80%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I would say that we are getting, I'm sorry for this word, a very good human material in order to be a part of the Jewish community of this country. The question is now, what shall we do with this? With this material, yeah, whether we will do our best in order to make and feel and be a part of the Jewish core of Israeli society, or we will say we're not interested in you.
Right. And how do you see the trends of Aliyah in the near future? Do you see? We spoke to Ambassador Brodsky from Ukraine, who said he definitely sees another wave of Aliyah from Ukraine coming up, depending on different situations, but also definitely the issue of heating in the winter, that in many European countries, including Ukraine, definitely are expected to have a problem with heating. Do you see any changes or any trends that are coming up?
I would say that unfortunately I don't know what was said by Ambassador Brodsky. But I would say that three objectives will make their impact on this trend. First of all, how quickly the war will stop, or at least how quickly the most important Jews populated centers will come back to normal life. Of course, we are not talking about Mariupol. That's probably the situation is extremely difficult. But whether Kharkov, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Kiev, and other places, Odessa, Nikolaev, and other places like that will be come back to a normal life, including normal Jewish community life. This is not so easy question, because the question is also whether the infrastructure of the Jewish community will be rebuilt. Before the war, the money, the budgets, the support came from international Jewish community, from Israel, but especially from the local wealthy Jews that are ready to contribute their money to. The same story is in Russia. Now the third element is out.
Is out
almost
at the moment,
out.
at least,
So
right.
the question is whether Israel and the Jewish world will be able to take this responsibility on them.
Right.
The second story is whether Europe will be better than Ukraine in this situation in terms of the heat and so on and so forth. My expectation is that regardless the energy issues, I would also say that not everybody happy of the recent immigrants, Jewish immigrants to Europe from the FSU. Not all of them are happy with the situation they found themselves. They're welcome, they're accepted well, and the moment people are secure, fed up, and have where to live, they're starting to ask questions, what I'm doing here.
Right.
So I wouldn't reject, as I said, that some of them will make decision to come to a Jewish state.
Right.
And finally, I think that immigration, aliyah from Russia, will continue. It seems to me that regardless what will go on in Russia, and when the war will stop, the dramatic move of Jews from Russia elsewhere, but especially to the state of Israel, Russian emigration is mostly Israeli-oriented.
Right.
That more or less clear. In terms of values, but also in terms of the opportunities and possibilities, and so on. I believe that a majority of them will be accommodated here, regardless the government policies and so on and so forth. They will take responsibility on themselves, and the Israeli society will be able to do their best. So I believe that this about 60,000 that we got is not the end of the story, it's just the beginning.
Right. And do you think Israel is doing enough, or are there more things that we can do to change or to adapt ourselves towards these immigrants, some of them refugees? There were recommendations about offering more services, more language, ulpanim, right, a place to teach Hebrew.
Like Americans say, the question of $1 million. I mean, it would be a question of $1 million if it wouldn't be a question for a few billion of dollars. Yeah.
Right.
But I would say that at the moment, Israeli government is doing its best. Government offices. I see the people who are committed to Aliyah more than they committed to their families.
Right. Working around the clock,
around the clock, and Nativ, the Jewish agency, the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration, in other places, volunteer communities.
Right.
It's also an interesting point that volunteer work in favor of new immigrants, strengthening the Jewish identity of people that are already here. Those so-called 1.5 generation, which
so they feel more Jewish now because they're helping new immigrants.
They, of course, Israeli and so on, but now they feel more Jewish than they feel more Russian Jewish.
Wow.
Or Russian-speaking Jewish.
Okay, that's good.
They started to speak this language that they almost forgotten.
Right.
And
that they grew up speaking.
I think that, yeah, and that this interaction is a good thing, both for Israeli society, for its Russian-speaking angle, and for new Olim.
Right.
So I would say that Israel is doing much, but of course,
yeah.
That could be done even more.
How? Like, what is needed in order to make the immigration, which, by the way, immigration anytime is a very difficult and not
both
a fun
of us
situation.
know that, yes. But I would say that two things are extremely important, or three things, as usual.
Right.
One thing, it's just a good word. Guys, you're welcome.
Right.
We need you. You are our brothers,
right.
regardless whether they are Jews according to Allah or not. Okay. Of course, that would be good to strengthen this message with some deeds. Like to say less about Aliyah shel Goyim ve'antishemin,
right.
Aliyah of Gentiles and anti-Semites.
Exactly.
First of all, it's incorrect. And second, it's very, very, very misleading and damaging. So to stop doing that in the media and in the political circles. And third, I would say, of course, money can solve a lot of problems. More consulate officials, more workers in the internal ministry, domestic affairs ministry, more budgets for special projects that let us hope that the next prime minister and next financial minister will continue what was done by the ongoing government and will even increase it.
Okay, thank you. So I could speak to you for hours because it's fascinating. So thank you very much, Professor Zeev Khanin, the academic chairman of the Institute for Euro-Asian Jewish Studies of the EAJC and Bar-Ilan University. Thank you very much for your time for your data. And let's hope that this immigration and Aliyah succeeds, and also wish the situation in these Jewish communities will actually be stable.
B'ezrat Hashem, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.